I'm Chris Epting. Over the years, it's been a privilege to write so many books about Huntington Beach, host the Hidden Huntington Beach television program, write newspaper articles, teach history classes, and lead historic walking tours while engaging with students across the city. I'm honored to speak during Founders Legacy Month, and I hope you enjoy the program you're about to watch.
I want to say welcome and thank you for being here. I also want to acknowledge our City Celebration Committee and three of our members are here tonight, Patty, Jeannie, and Ann. Raise your hands. This is a new committee that was formed by council. We've had 2 meetings, I think, so far. We have a lot of events planned for the whole rest of the year, so you'll be seeing that more follow us on the city's social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, because we'll be promoting those every month. And this is our first one, which is awesome, that we have so many people here tonight. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's a couple seats over here in the corner, if you want to grab those. And I also want to acknowledge one of our planning commissioners. I saw Dominic McGee is here. Want to wave your hand in the back? Thank you for being here.
Julie mentioned briefly, it was Julie, if anybody is familiar, and I assume a few of you are, with Hidden Huntington Beach, it was, I think in 2019, I got a call from Julie, and we had worked on things before, and she said, you know, the city, I forget what the exact details were, but there was this opportunity where there was some airtime where they had to fill it with something. The city had this time, and they were sort of mandated to put something on, and she said, well, we had a cup of coffee one day, and she said, you know, maybe think about something, if you have any ideas, what we could do. So I went home and thought about it. This is pre-COVID, and I called her back, and I said, well, what if we did kind of a thing called Hidden Huntington Beach? And Julie thought it was great. COVID hit, but Julie was the one. I'm telling you, without her, it would not exist. It really, so if we can have a hand for my dear friend Julie. It was her faith and tenacity and creativity that really made it possible. So, and Julie also is a very good writer. If you know anything about me, I also write. I have this other kind of writing life where I write memoirs of people and I teach writing classes. Some of you have been in those classes. And I have a book that came, I'm not here to sell books, but there's a book I wrote recently called Where One Hears the Rain that's all about writing your story. And this is a copy for you. Because Julie's got great stories to tell. And you know, I know you've been working on writing things in the past, and now you have no reason to not.
I know.
You know, because again, you're so brave and you're such a warrior. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very
much. Love you.
Love you too.
All right.
All right.
Julie Toledo. I also noticed Alan Ray. You're here, right? Where are you? Alan Ray is another. You're on the Historic Resources Board now, right? So another great historian. I don't apologize for not acknowledging everybody. I am really knocked out by this group. This is amazing. Thank you so much. I was invited to come speak for, I guess, the topic was kind of open. It was a founder's legacy was the note I got. And when you talk about the founding of Huntington Beach, there's a lot of ways to go. I mean, we were talking a couple minutes ago, if you ever go to Good Shepherd Cemetery off of Talbot and Beach, if you walk in there, there's founders of Huntington Beach in there. You can see the Talbots, you can see the Gothards, the Slaters. I mean, that really is a very historic place to go visit. In fact, what a lot of people don't know about that cemetery are if you know where Brightwater is, by Bolsa Chica, our old late great friend Bill Kettler, who died last year, 101 years old, his discovery of skeletal remains that were Native Americans found there years ago is what really helped prevent a lot of the building. I mean, some of you may think it's a lot up there now. It's going to be way more than that. but those actual skeletons that were recovered, those are in an unmarked grave at Good Shepherd. So Good Shepherd in and of itself is in terms of founder's history, is very historic. So think about that. If you're interested in going to see where those things are, and that was the original cemetery in Huntington Beach. And the oldest part of the cemetery, the gate that kind of butts up against Beach Boulevard, as you know, Patricia, that's where you'll find the Civil War. I think there are 13 Civil War soldiers there, including Tom Talbert's father. There's a lot of great history there worth checking out. We did a bus tour there once where we Good Shepherd, there's no one from Good Shepherd here tonight, right? They don't take kindly to sort of organized tour excursions, which is cool. I mean, to each his own. Westminster is a whole different story. They love it, and they've had me speak there. We've done tours there. But we were doing a hidden history bus tour not long ago, and I said, let's just take I operate from the idea of what is it, better to ask for forgiveness than permission? That's my creed in life. And so we brought the bus in, and I knew we'd only be there for about 20 minutes or so. So by the time anybody could freak out, we'd be on our way. And we did go in there and really kind of lead a tour to visit these really historic sites. So that's one founder's piece. What I wanted to do tonight, again, was look at the founding of Huntington Beach through a lens about three people that you may or may not be familiar with, that to me, if not founding the city, they set the table for what did become Huntington Beach. So with that as kind of our little tease thing here, founder's legacy, it's three men. And if you follow Hidden Huntington Beach, you may have heard these names before, but I wanted to unpack it a little more deeply to give you some background and backdrop and appreciation on three people, again, who didn't really know each other, didn't really work together, but collectively their legacy really does kind of get us to Huntington Beach. The first one we're going to talk about is Robert Northam. Show of hands, who knows that name? Nobody? One? Okay, good. I like that. I was hoping tonight would be sort of virgin territory in terms of history, so good. The next one is Jaro von Schmidt. And the third one is Phillip Stanton. All right. Now, Phillip Stanton, you're probably going to be familiar with just because of that last name, which we're going to get to about why that name matters, what he did, and what his relationship is to Huntington Beach. But a little backstory, we're going to do it in that order. What I'd like to do is go through each of these three gentlemen's life, how it applies to Huntington Beach, and then there's a segment after that. If you know me, I'm very sort of geographically driven. I like places. I like thinking about what was here, what was there. So the back end of this presentation will be places that you can visit today that are relative to these three guys, okay? And then we'll do some questions after if you like. So Robert Northam, just some very general backstory on him. He was a very wealthy guy. The money came from an inheritance. His father, Edward Fernandez Northam, his uncle rather, passed away in San Francisco, and Robert Northam acquires a lot of money. That's sort of the basic thing. You've all passed where Robert Northam used to live, by the way. If you know anything about Huntington Beach, you are very familiar with where he lived in Huntington Beach. But the bottom line is, in the late 1800s, he comes into a lot of money, and the first thing he decides to do is start an ostrich farm, which is very popular back in the late 1800s. There was actually, in Los Angeles too, not to digress too much, but you had alligator farms, you had ostrich farms, you had this, California at that point had this sort of exotic bent to it where anything was sort of possible. I was talking today to another group at lunch talking about, the Lion Country Safari, the Japanese Deer Park, Buffalo Ranch. Orange County, back in the day with all the open space, which LA didn't have, really was a haven for these kinds of places. And so Northam starts the first commercial ostrich farm over in Anaheim. And there's a high demand for ostrich plumes. $3 per plume, going back in the late 1800s, was a lot of money. And public interest, the farm was described as a curiosity with reports of distinguished arrivals of ostriches. The eggs, of course, Northam would serve hard-boiled ostrich eggs at Chamber of Commerce luncheons, and that's what, you'd go, and you can find these places today, but you would go and be entertained by the ostriches. So that's sort of Northam's first foray into finance. He was a member of the California Republican Party, very wealthy. In 1894, he was investigated for mismanagement of 150 grand in company funds. He was a bit of a shadowy character, Robert Northam. And again, very powerful, very wealthy, accusations of appropriation of funds for personal use. Ultimately, no charges were filed, but he was kind of branded as a guy that you had to keep your eye on for a variety of reasons. And Northam had a lot of family drama. In 1898, his daughter left society life to join Madame Helena Majeska's theater company. Has anyone ever been to Majeska's home out in... It's a great California landmark. It's a beautifully refurbished home where she lived out kind of near Silverado Canyon. And you can go visit it, you can tour the house. It really is a remarkable place. But Northam's daughter runs off. Maud was a very kind of wild child, I guess you would call her, and really gave him a lot of consternation. But Northam carries on, and this is where we get to us here, is he soon retires to a 1,600-acre ranch. This is in about 1895. Okay, he purchases this ranch. And the ranch, it's a large ranch where he grew barley, walnuts, apricots. He ran cattle and horses. Now, in 1901, he's going to sell that to a guy named Phillip Stanton, which we'll get to later. But does anybody know where Northam's ranch was? I know some of you probably do. Where was it?
Yorktown in Maine.
Yorktown in Maine, exactly. And I'm going to get to that a little bit more. His nickname was Diamond Bob Northam because he threw money around a lot. When he purchases this land, he transports a single-story Queen Anne Victorian mansion, 12 miles. It's dragged by mules to the location near Yorktown in Maine today. Okay? And, his home provides... It's my favorite park in Huntington Beach. Has anybody been to the park where it used to be? A few of you. I would encourage you all in the next week to make your way to the park because it really takes you back to the beginning. It's the late 1800s where he had his home up on this hill. There was nothing around, so you could see the ocean. It's one of the highest points in Huntington Beach. The location, which I'll get to later, is an open city park today. It's open to the public. When you stand up there today on the hottest of days, there's always a nice cool breeze. And that was Northam's ranch. And again, what sets the table for Huntington Beach is that he ultimately sells that ranch in 1901 to Phillip Stanton. So keep that in mind. We're going to get back to that, okay? He's a very powerful guy, but by the early 1900s, he's kind of reaching retirement age. He's going to go back to Los Angeles, and he sells that property. But that property, that 1,500 acres or so, that becomes what we know today as Huntington Beach. It stretches to the ocean. Okay, and it starts near Yorktown in Maine, so keep that in mind. He gets married that year in 1901 to a 20-year-old typist. He's in his 50s at this point. This is very scandalous at the point. Today it would be a little weird. You got to put everything back in that lens of what it would have been like in 1901. A breach of promise lawsuit, a former suitor, Stanley Gilly, sued his wife for $50,000 because she broke their engagement off. Finally, his wife files for divorce in 1911. Tensions in the marriage. Leota is hospitalized after an attack by 3 women at the mansion. He dies in 1912, and she acquires his entire estate. But we got to get back to the preservation. The ranch house where he lived up there burned down in 2000. Does anybody remember that fire? It was very mysterious. I had just moved to Huntington Beach. And I'll show you a photo later that I took because I heard about this fire and a lot of talk that it was arson. There had been a group at that point looking to restore and refurbish the house. Evidently there were some squatters living in it and it just wasn't maintained and protected and the house went up in flames. And the other thing he left, which I'll show you a picture of later, in Los Angeles, he had a barn transported there from the area, from the Orange County area, that ultimately became the Hollywood Heritage Museum because it's where the first film was ever shot in Hollywood, The Squaw Man. Which we'll get to. So that's a little bit about Robert Northam. Again, it's all about that house, though, and that ranch, and who he sold that property to. Again, Phillip Stanton is who he sold it to. We'll circle back to that in just a couple of minutes. Now, Jaro von Schmidt. Who knows that name? Jaro von Schmidt was, again, very wealthy. All these guys are wealthy. Money plays a part in all three of these men's lives. Jaro von Schmidt, Count Jaro von Schmidt, was a prominent hunting figure in the late 19th century. He was Austrian, very wealthy, very mysterious. He was part of a gun club called the San Joaquin Gun Club, which was located where UC Irvine is today. In fact, the wetlands that are still there, the original duck house is still there. It's a great place if you like to go bird watch down there. You can go down there. But Jaro von Schmidt was a member of this gun club, which was owned by James Irvine II, son of Irvine. And they had a falling out in the late 1800s, and Jaro von Schmidt says, you know what, I want to have my own gun club, a club even more prestigious than the San Joaquin. So he wanders Orange County looking for that spot that's going to work, and he finds himself on a bluff that today is near the intersection of Warner and Coast Highway. You know the bluff I'm talking about. You know the palm trees up on that bluff. He planted those trees after forming the Bolsa Chica Gun Club in 1895. It opened in 1899. Those trees you see up there, everybody know the trees I'm talking about? Those to me are like they're like the first skyline of Orange County. I mean, those are so special. And I drove by them tonight coming here, and I get a little choked up because those trees are old. Planted in 1899, they're already 125 years old. Those trees don't last much beyond that. It's a very temperate growing climate, so they've done very well up there, obviously. But at a certain point, those trees are not going to be there. And those really are the witnesses to the Bolsa Chica Gun Club. But anyway, when von Schmidt moved to California, he loved outdoor sports, loved hunting, and so he's the first president of the Bolsa Chica Gun Club, which again sets the table for the birth of Huntington Beach, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. He lived in Tustin, von Schmidt, his home. In the early days of Tustin, men relied on their shooting skills to provide fresh meat for their families. Hunting was a thing throughout the county. There were a lot of wetlands and a lot of hunting, and that's how people provided food. The area surrounding Tustin was a veritable hunter's paradise with abundant wildlife in the hills, canyons, flatlands, and marshes. Game such as bear, there were bear, deer, antelope, mountain lions, rabbits, quail, wild pigs, ducks, and geese were plentiful throughout the county. And von Schmidt made a habit of shooting those things. Founds the gun club in 1899, as I said, and he remained a prominent member throughout, actually not just the first decade, but the second decade as well. Now, why does he matter, and how does it affect the birth of Huntington Beach? He contributed a lot to local culture. The Santa Ana Board of Trade invited von Schmidt to write an article entitled Game for a booklet published in 1891 about local game birds. He listed numerous game birds found in Orange County, including cranes, snipes, avocets, rails, curlews, ibis, plovers. I mean, he really was an expert. He highlighted a story of a boy from Tustin who set a shooting record by killing 29 wild geese with one shot. So he really was a very preeminent aviary expert and hunter. And the thing was, when he established the gun club at Bolsa Chica, it had very strict English hunting rules. You could only, the limits were very strictly adhered to. You couldn't just go fire randomly. He really had a very strict policy of how the hunting would take place there. Now, what gets him to Huntington Beach? Jump ahead a little bit here. He would occasionally exaggerate his claims, but this is the thing that gets interesting. He's remembered for his contributions, but here are some images of the Bolsa Chica Gun Club. Again, think about that when you drive by. If you've ever has anybody ever walked up there? When you walk the trail, that wonderful trail. Have you ever seen the two steel rings where the Panama gun mounts used to be during World War II? If you know where those are, just to your left, nature has totally reclaimed the area. It's very gnarled and very knotty and very, very heavy brush. when you see that in that picture there of that beautiful putting green lawn, that's where all that overgrown brush is today. That's that exact spot, which is really something. I mean, the gun club was not just the finest gun club in California, it was one of the finest gun clubs in the United States. And what really changes the game for us here in Huntington Beach is in 1903, where a member, a very wealthy guy from Pasadena named Henry Huntington, becomes a member of the gun club. Now, why is that important? At that point, Huntington has recently acquired from his uncle the Pacific Electric Railway. So he's changing the course of Southern California by running his trains. But when he's a member in 1903, he hears about, Huntington that is, through von Schmidt, hears about a place called Pacific City, just down the coast a little bit, which we're going to get to now. So that's the gun club. And when Huntington becomes a member, he hears about Pacific City, and Huntington's view is, no, again, if there's no gun club, something would have been developed here. But I'm not sure it would have been Huntington Beach. Because when Huntington heard about Pacific City, he became very interested, and he purchased it in 1903. And he began running the now famous red cars down the line. This picture is right by Dog Beach. I thought of this driving down here tonight, too. And again, you can imagine the amount of upkeep that it took with rails right on the sand like that. They had crews out every single day brushing the sand off the rails. But all of a sudden now, once he began running the trains down, before the trains from Huntington Beach area to Los Angeles was a 2-day trip. It's a 2-day trip. The minute the train started, it became a 2-hour trip. You think about it as a lifestyle change, going from 2 days to 2 hours. The joke today is it's still about 2 hours if you want to go to LA, but technology notwithstanding, progress, it still was a huge change. And again, the gun club, founded by von Schmidt, to me is a good founder's story because it got you Henry Huntington there. And once Huntington's there, now he learns about Pacific City, and that really changes the game. I love this clip. This is the LA Times in May of 1903. Okay, Huntington has just purchased, see up there it says deed to valuable property, and it talks about Huntington purchasing the land, and that last sentence of the red line says, which will in future be known as Huntington Beach. I'm pretty sure this is the first time the term Huntington Beach has ever been used publicly. May of 1903. Of course, it takes a year for the trains to arrive properly. You know there's a 4th of July parade here, right? The first 4th of July parade was held July 4th, 1904, and it was one part to celebrate the nation's birthday, but a bigger part to welcome the red cars officially. That day, supposedly 50,000 people visited the area. The trains ran 24/7, if you can believe that. They never stopped running. And the parade really was, again, a chance to welcome the trains. So that's Jaro von Schmidt, again, really got us to, what that is, I wrote a book about the Bolsa Chica Gun Club. That's one of the shooting ledgers from 1911. If you have good eyes, you can see von Schmidt's name there on the list. But it would show how detailed it was. And I have all of the logs. I found these in a reliquary out of Claremont University. Incredible history, because every day you can see who shot what, who hit their limit, what time they shot, what the weather was. These pages of the logbook. And again, von Schmidt wanted this done very deliberately. He wanted every day at the gun club, heavily detailed and documented like this. So again, von Schmidt for me, in developing the gun club, you know, Huntington Beach is created in 1903, but the gun club is still there. The gun club's there all through the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And the original gun club members, including people like Jared Torrance, who a couple of years later would create the city of Torrance. It included an LA realtor named Moses Sherman, who at the gun club, I have a desk from the gun club that somebody graciously bequeathed me. I think it's the only known artifact left from the gun club. And part of me wants to believe, because the story goes that Moses Sherman laid out an idea on a table at the gun club. And I look at this desk and I think, what if this was the table where Moses Sherman laid out his plans for a place called Sherman Oaks, which he did. So you've got these movers and shakers. Whenever you drive by and look up at those palm trees, Coast Highway and Warner, think about the history that was written up there, not just of Huntington Beach, but of Southern California. And part of that legacy was made possible by Jaro von Schmidt. So to me, he definitely belongs in a founder's conversation. Phillip Stanton. For me, Phillip Stanton is he's the great unsung, I would say hero, but person, historic figure in Orange County who never really gets his due. I really like this guy, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to walk you through what it is about Phillip Stanton that interests me. Phillip Stanton, a little background, career in real estate. He's from Ohio, moves to California, key figure in land development in Orange County. Now, founds Huntington Beach. What Phillip Stanton did is he had an idea. When he moves to California, again, he's an Ohio farm boy, comes to California with one idea, essentially, burning in his brain and in his heart. And what that idea is, Atlantic City at that point is a very big deal. Atlantic City is founded in the 1850s, I believe. And Stanton thinks to himself, Atlantic City is incredible. You got amusement parks and gambling halls and brothels, all this stuff that makes a beach city really powerful and really important. What he thinks to himself is he's going to found the West Coast counterpart to that and call it Pacific City. That's his dream. So when he purchases that land from Northam, going back to Northam, now we've got this plan in place for a coastal city that's going to rival Atlantic City. Okay? And we see here, he founds Pacific City Hall at 122 Main Street. I'm going to show you a picture of that later, which was really the center of Pacific City. Now, you know there's a place today called Pacific City, right? The shopping area. That's an homage to the original name, Pacific City. When he purchases what belonged to Northam, the original name was Shell Beach. They changed to Bolsa Beach, but when this idea of Atlantic City really became formidable in his mind, he decided to name it Pacific City. So that is the birth of Pacific City. The problem is, in 1901, nobody can get to Pacific City. There's no trains. So the population, when Huntington is a member of the gun club, population is about 100. That's it. But there is a wooden pier. He does lay out a street system in the hopes. Now, that today, if you look at the top shot, that's the original Pacific City Hall in 1901. When you look down, you know where Wahoo's is today? That's the original shell of that structure. That's the location of the original Pacific City Hall. Stanton is elected to the California State. And again, by 1901, he sells out, 1902 actually, and now he runs for the California State Assembly. He's elected. Re-elected in 1904, 1906, 1908. He's a politician, served as Speaker of the Assembly from 1909 to 1910, ran for governor in 1910, but lost. And this was a little line from an ad in the LA Times in 1901. Pacific City, a new beach resort 4 miles northwest of Newport Beach, is attracting much attention. You know, you have to remember, Huntington Beach, Pacific City, was always designed as a resort community. Now, I know this becomes a subject of hot debate of how developed should it be, you know, and it's always that weird balance of what the locals need and deserve versus a tourist community. I have to tell you, as soon as Huntington purchases Huntington Beach and creates it, 1904, when the first Methodist tent camp arrives with 50,000 people, right there, I think everybody knew this was going to be a resort community, because what would happen is the Methodist tent camps would come in and people would go back home to Oklahoma and Wyoming and say, oh my God, I was in this place called Huntington Beach, and they would return as tourists after that. So the tourist thing, that seed is planted really from the get-go, really from the beginning in 1901, because Stanton envisioned, again, the Atlantic City of the West Coast. And that's Atlantic City. That's what he pictured. Now, after he sells out to Huntington, Stanton does not let go of this idea of wanting to establish a coastal counterpart, a West Coast counterpart to Atlantic City. It didn't happen in Pacific City, but he still didn't want to let go of that concept. So he didn't. He works his way up the coast a little bit. By the way, that's the original Pacific City map. You can see the little pier which he had there, and the grid system of downtown is very much like it was today. Again, the dream of Pacific City really serves as a blueprint from modern-day Huntington Beach. So again, going back, we've got Robert Northam, who originally brings his farm in, which gets us to Phillip Stanton. We've got Jaro von Schmidt. These three guys, like I said earlier, in their own ways have contributed something, deliberately or not, that all work toward the foundation of Huntington Beach. Again, Stanton serves on the Republican National Committee until 1916. And then he creates this. He finally figures out how to do this. And he creates this place. And it's, if you think of that picture of Atlantic City, this looks very much like it, doesn't it? Doesn't that? Well, it's not Atlantic City. He has an idea. He originally calls it Bay City. Then it becomes Jewel City. But he thinks, you know what? From a tourist standpoint, there's a better name for this place that I'm creating, which is Seal Beach. That's what this is. That's Seal Beach. It's not Atlantic City. That's what Seal Beach looked like in 1915. It's crazy. I mean, it really, we all think, I know Seal Beach today is sort of the go-to where we think, I wish we had that little quiet, that main street where they maintained a lot of the old buildings. And what's more charming than Seal Beach, right? And it does throw back, I think, to Huntington Beach years ago. I get the comparison. But Seal Beach back in the day, he did pull it off. He did manage to create this out of control thing with not one but two giant wooden roller coasters, gambling halls, the whole thing. But it comes down in part due to the Depression. There's a lot of political graft there, which he can't control. But he does create. He's created, Stanton now has created Pacific City, and he's created Seal Beach. He's already left a legacy, but he's not done yet. He's got one last trick up his sleeve. Now we know that's Seal Beach. The city of Stanton, how does that happen? Well, what happens is a bunch of farmers here from the city of Anaheim in 1911, that they want to come in for what was politely going to be known as a sewer farm. They were going to, almost through eminent domain, take away the farms from all the farmers. Now, I explain this in the next slide, but I'll talk you through it instead. Stanton hears about this, and it bothers him for a couple of reasons. One, he's a former farm kid. He gets what farmers bring to a community. And he's offended that the city of Anaheim is going to roll in and kind of just jack these farmers around, take their property, and displace them. Stanton knows that Orange County at this point is growing lima beans, celery, strawberries, chili peppers. He knows there's an agricultural backbone to Orange County, and he doesn't want that lost because some bureaucrats are going to come in and rip this land away. So Stanton goes to the farmers, and he gathers them up, and he says, look, you got one way out of this, basically. Farmers don't know what he's talking about. He says, if you incorporate as a city, they can't touch you. That's what you need to do. And the farmers say, well, great, but we don't know how to form a city. And Stanton says, I got you. Stanton, who has formed Pacific City, who has formed Pacific, he understands what it takes. And he says, you know what? I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to file. I'm going to create this city for you. And he does. And as an homage, as a thank you to Stanton, the farmers vote to name that city Stanton. So whenever you drive through Stanton, think about, again, Phillip Stanton to me, like I said, you all know where Stanton is, but you maybe didn't know what this guy brought to Orange County. The birth of Huntington Beach, Seal Beach, and Stanton. But Stanton is almost my favorite because this was a fairly powerful politician and businessman at that point, but he never forgot his roots. And he went to bat for these guys, and he pulled it off, and that's what I kind of went into explaining here. But what I want to do now, and by the way, Stanton, as I mentioned, he went to Anaheim city officials and said, look, get off these farmers' backs. I will give you property of mine. I will give it to you so you can create your little sewer farm. And they didn't take him up on it. And that was kind of the hold my beer moment for Stanton, where it's like, okay, we're gonna play it different here. And he did it. So again, Stanton to me is a really great unsung hero, not just locally, but throughout the county. He dies in September of 1945 in Seal Beach, California, the city he founded. So what I want to do now, I want to talk about a couple of locations. If you wanted to go today to reconnect with these three men whose stories are intrinsically connected to the founding of Huntington Beach, where can we go? Well, who knows what that is in the middle of that picture? The grain silos. Those silos were part of the Northam Ranch. Now, I will tell you, we did, I think it was the third or fourth episode of Hidden Huntington Beach was about the silos. Connie Mandick's not here, is she? Good friend of mine, great local historian, served her city well. Connie fought the fight in the late 70s. They were going to tear the silos down. These were original 1920s grain silos, 60 feet high. Has anyone ever stood next to them? You're going to want to do this. I'm telling you, in the next week, if anybody wants me to send you this presentation, hit me up. I will send you the deck so you can go do this tour if you want. But we did this episode on the silos. Connie and I went out there. We told the story. And a week or so later, I got a call from somebody at City Hall who said, "You're not going to like this." I said, "What?" The area is being redeveloped. It's been purchased. And the silos are coming down. And I said, "Oh, God, really?" And I was kind of going into that mode of what can we do? Is this a City Hall moment? Is it posting on Hidden Huntington Beach to get these thousands of like-minded, history-loving people down there? And they said, "No, wait, give it a beat. Let's see what happens." Well, the developers watched the episode, as I was told, of Hidden Huntington Beach, and they were so taken with the history, they redrew their plans to help protect and help those survive. So kudos to them, and they do stand there today. That's what's in the middle there. Paul, by your old office there. Now, here's some aerial shots just to orient, basically, when we talk about the Northam Ranch, what are we looking at here? I have circled Huntington Beach High School, okay? We see that? The grain silo, that's Main Street, kind of cutting across there. The grain silos I've pointed out, and that mass of trees near the grain silos, that's the old Northam Ranch as it looked. This is going back to the 1930s, okay, just to orient yourself on what we're looking at here. Here's another kind of angle where you've got same shot today, and you can see, the high school, the baseball diamond along Golden West, and where the grain silos stand today. That's the Northam Ranch Mansion as taken in about 1930. This is the building that burned down in 2000. Okay. Did anybody ever go there, by the way? Some of you. They say the Huntington Beach Company used it as their offices for decades. And they say that, I don't know if this is true, but a number of people have said that back in like the 60s and 70s, certain council members during breaks and meetings would go to the mansion right across from the new City Hall. Actually, it would have been post-1974 when that building opened. And they would kind of get their marching orders of how to vote and then go back to City Hall. The Huntington Beach Company was very powerful. It still has stakes in the community, but back in the 70s and even 80s was still very powerful. So that's the building. I took that the other day as the grain silo. Again, it's the environment around it has changed, but it's still there. They've put a new roof on it, which is great. There we see the grain silo. I love the grain silos. It's sort of like those trees. It's a great historic marker. A lot has changed around it in 100 or so years, but it's still there. It still bears witness. That's in the 1970s. Okay, if you go to the site today where, what's the name of the facility that's there? Sunrise, I believe. Oh, Ivy. Well, if you go there today, there's a marker at the entrance that tells the story of the Northam Ranch. Those bricks the marker sits on were part of the Northam Ranch. Those were rescued from the fire and repurposed to hold the plaque. And you can walk up, if you go up that staircase today, when you arrive up there, you're in one of the most serene little known parks. Again, my favorite park in the city. And the Northam Ranch sat in the middle of those are all the original trees up there. And the house sat right, that's where Robert Northam would sit and look out at the ocean, worry about his daughter who ran off with Madame Francesca and everything else. But that site up there. Now I took that picture when I moved in 1999. That was the police wanted to know if anybody had seen anything. And this was really one of the first times I got very sort of bitten by the local HB history bug, wondering what it was like up there and who had lived there and what the history was. Okay, this is 1973. Yorktown used to be called Mansion Avenue because of the home what was there. That's them changing the signs in the early 70s. Anybody remember what was called Mansion? The name Mansion of that street was an homage, an acknowledgement of the home that was there. Okay, again, I'm all about the trees. The trees to me are the witnesses. And if you go up there today, that's a photo of the park today. And that's the same tree that would have sat against the Northam home. Okay, as long as you can find like one tree like that, you can fill everything else in. I love when there's one natural marker that allows you to complete the picture. The old HB Ranch that was there in the 1930s, that had their own kind of branding sign there. And that tree, that's the tree that's there, and that's a very rare, my friend Robert Terry, whose family owned Terry Motors downtown. This was the day of his wedding up there. He was married at that house, I think in the early 1980s, and that's what that photo is from. But again, it gives you an idea. We say mansion, it wasn't necessarily a very elaborate, opulent place. It was fairly low-key architecturally, but again, it was all about the location. And that's if you ever go to Hollywood, this is a wonderful museum. Again, the first film, Squaw Man, was shot in that building, and that belonged to Robert Northam as well. And that's kind of a fun little Hollywood connection to Huntington Beach. All right, Jaro von Schmidt locations. His home in Tustin is a historic landmark. You can't go inside, but I think it's well worth visiting. It's a really beautiful house. He would have lived there when he founded the Bolsa Chica Gun Club. This is one of two homes. He had another home in LA that I'll show you in a minute. But his home is a recognized landmark. It's got the plaque on it, built in 1881, and it connects us to the gun club in Huntington Beach. And that's his home up off of Adams in a historic district in Los Angeles. Again, it's got protected national landmark status, and that's the home of Jaro von Schmidt. And if you go to the gun club, the city, they've put up nice markers up there. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a board member of the Bolsa Chica Conservancy, who's having their board meeting tonight, which I skipped to do this. And I'm glad I did because it's like, it's such a nice crowd up here. If you go up there, there are some nice placards that lay out and tell the story of the gun club. And you can look at pictures there. There are those trees I was referencing earlier. That eucalyptus grove, that is not native to the area. That grove was planted there for firewood at the gun club, and it thrived and it flourished, and it's still there today. Again, trees to me, it's a whole other conversation, but trees to me are wonderful historic markers, and we've got them at the Northam Ranch, and we've certainly got them up there where the gun club used to be. In my book about the gun club, I located the day those trees were planted, 1901, those particular trees, and that's them today, those same trees. So again, it's you can see the gun club structure off to the left, and if you know anything about me, you know the gun club to me is a very sacred spot. A lot of history up there, going back thousands of years, by the way. It started with the Native Americans all the way through Abel Stearns and everything that took place there, culminating in the gun club, which was there for 60 some odd years. If you haven't been up there, take a walk up there. It's a beautiful walk. It's a wonderful time of year to do it. It's an easy walk. And you'll find a lot of cool things up there. That's me with my gun club book there down on Main Street if you're interested. Phillip Stanton, a couple of locations related to him. If you're driving on Beach Boulevard, kind of as you approach Trask, that's the original Stanton City Hall. It's like a building out of the Old West. And that's where Stanton supposedly met with the farmers, you know, had his meeting, got it done, and the birth of Stanton took place. It's not open today, but it's an amazing little building. I don't know what its protected status is. It certainly deserves something. It is a very important piece of Orange County history, and again, it relates to Phillip Stanton. You can go visit the Stanton home in Anaheim, which is owned by a college now. They do allow visitors to go, and it's a beautiful restored home where he lived. And I did a book on Orange County Then and Now, and I used Jewel City as kind of the then and now comparison. So when you go to Seal Beach today, that's very much part. It's interesting, if you know the pier there, there's that ramp that goes down on the left. If you look at the old picture, that ramp is there. That's all original. But you can see those beautiful spires and things all taken down. But nevertheless, that pier, that's a Phillip Stanton creation. That's still very much part of his memory. And he's buried at Melrose Abbey Cemetery over in Anaheim. And I've talked a lot. Has anybody ever been there before? We've been. Melrose Abbey, I have a very deep emotional connection to, because it is there where the person is laid to rest who wrote the third most performed song in American history. Anybody Any guess? Take Men to the Ball Game. The first song, most performed song in American history is the national anthem. Second song is what? Happy Birthday. Which, by the way, is now in the public domain. You ever know that, remember going to a restaurant and they would sing like, happy, happy, happy birthday? They wouldn't sing happy birthday. They couldn't sing happy birthday. It was protected by copyright. But now it's in the public domain, so you will hear happy birthday in restaurants. But Take Me to the Ball Game, the guy that wrote that, which is a whole other presentation I do about baseball, is laid to rest in that cemetery. And I had a marker placed there for him in honor, because his grave was sort of forgotten there. So I raised money, and if you go there, there's all. But what the thing is, what I learned is, a little side plot, I raised all this money and stuff, and a woman was going to donate the granite, and I was going to replace the marker. But they wouldn't let me replace the marker because the California law, which makes total sense today but didn't make sense the day I was there with the money and the granite and all that, is that you can't, he had no next of kin, Jack Norworth. And you need, the lady there says, look, we looked up, you need a blood relative to approve altering a final resting place. That day I thought, how dare you? Looking back on it, you shouldn't just be able to go in and change someone's grave. So what we did is we purchased a plot with the money about 70 yards away, and I had this marker placed there. It tells the whole story of Jack Norworth, but it says, if you really want to visit him, he's not here. You got to turn around and go back like this. And I counted off how many steps it was. So that's, if you ever go to Melrose Abbey to see Phillip Stanton, you got to go see the Jack Norworth marker. Baseball fan, I get notes all the time that fans that go pay respects to Jack Norworth. But anyway, that's where Phillip Stanton is. And that's what I have for you tonight. Robert Northam, Jaro von Schmidt, Phillip Stanton, they all played a part in helping found what became Huntington Beach, not really knowing what they were doing. I mean, Stanton was probably the most focused in that he had a dream and a vision for what the place should be. Northam just owned the property that he sold to Stanton, and von Schmidt had the gun club, but somehow this sort of triangulation all resulted in Huntington Beach. That's why we're here now. I thank you for hanging out with me for the however long we've been here. This is really a fun chance to chat about this, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. Thank you.